Boys, welcome back to our Barbers United Fantasy Football League weekly recap videos. We are here to recap week 2. I am your host, Jonas Thatcher, and I'm here with our man Lucas Larson, aka Book of Mormoms, aka number 1 seed in the league. So, how does it feel?
It feels pretty good. This last week, my team had the highest output as far as points go. So I had a few players that, didn't really do all that great last week. So it was kind of nice to see, those guys that I expected to play well have a bounce back. Devontae Smith had a pretty good game last night, and Amari Cooper started getting some touches. So kind of feels pretty good. Week 2, obviously it's really early, but,
Off
feels
to a
nice.
good start. And far away from having to get a haircut. So top of the standings. So
Yep.
The farther away you can stay from that, the better.
Yeah.
But shout out to my man Lucas here. As you can see, we've got a 6 setup here. We're actually at his place. He got the whole thing set up. So shout out to your YouTube channel, because he has a YouTube channel that he does some sports videos and things like that. What's the name of it?
So the channel is called Triple L. If you search Triple L, you're going to get a girl that takes a lot of ridiculous shots of herself. So make sure you search Triple L Sports.
Okay.
Or Triple L UNC. Those will pull up some of my videos. But I do a lot of sports videos. Wild World Sports is it's our latest series. Just basically recaps the successes, failures, and major events in sports history. So if that sounds good to you, check the channel out.
All right, well, let's get into it. We've got the matchups here. We had a great week 2. And so we're going to go ahead and start off with mine. I played against Jacob Weir, and going into the halfway point of Sunday, after the first round of games and even the first half of the second slate of games, I was toast. I think I had at least between a 1 and 5% chance of winning. And so literally it was from Kyler Murray waking up in that second half, running around for that 2-point conversion forever, and willing the Cardinals to victory. He literally willed my team to victory. Got 26 points. I really do think, I have to remember, but he had to have less than 5 points going into halftime of that game. They were down 20-0. It looked like there was no shot. He does that. Aaron Jones comes out Sunday night game, absolutely kills it, and they just give my team life. They just inject fuel. Thankfully, Derrick Henry didn't have a great game. Going into last night, Derrick Henry needed to have 30 points to win. Kind of a long shot, but it's Derrick Henry, so I was a little nervous, but we held on, got a nice victory. But halfway through Sunday, I thought there was no chance of me winning.
Man, and in this matchup too, like Carson Wentz, it's really weird. He's actually had a pretty solid output in fantasy these first 2 weeks, and kind of bouncing back from a rough year that he had. But you did get a little fortunate. I'm looking at Derrick Henry here and Devontae Adams. Usually those two guys are pretty reliable in getting you some points. Even Judy, Judy usually gets will get some points and had a good week last week. But yeah, Aaron Jones was definitely big time.
Yeah.
Sunday night.
Yeah, I think Judy got hurt, and that kind of fueled that. And then Adams, that Cardinals Raiders game, I think that second half they were just scared of losing the lead. They were just not even throwing the ball much, and the Cardinals just had the ball literally the entire second half. So there was nothing he could do there. So I am now sitting at 2-0, and I am number 3 in the league, I believe. And Jacob is now 0-2, so not off to a great start for Call of Duty. So on to our next matchup, we have Hunter Ford versus Josh Turley. This was our closest matchup of the week. Literally came down to 1 point. So let's go ahead. We'll look at these players and kind of see what they did here. Did you have any analysis on this game, my man?
Yeah, so obviously the big thing that stands out with this one is Patty Mahomes. He had a monster week last week, and even really looking at this game, he had 235, 2 touchdowns. For a regular quarterback, that's not bad, but for him, and especially for what he paid for Mahomes, which is the same as what people were paying for, some of the best, the top 5 players in the league, you really want to have a big output for him, or from him. So with it only being a point difference, that stands out. Tyreek Hill definitely was big for him, but really the biggest difference in this is, you look at Julio Jones. He leaves Julio Jones in his starting lineup, and it just kills you whenever you don't have that whole team kind of come together and have 3 or 4 players that have, beating expectations. When you have that big fat 0 on the board, that really kills your chances of winning. And when it comes down to 1 point, literally anybody else on his team would have been able to get it for him. So it just shows the importance of checking your lineup.
No kidding. Check your lineup, boys. It's important. Literally, you switch that out for just about anybody. I mean, I don't know who he has on his bench. Let's scroll down here real quick. Literally anybody on his bench. I mean, James Robinson on the bench, Jarvis Landry, any of those guys would have made it work. I don't know when Julio was ruled out, if that was a last-second decision or not, but got to check those lineups, got to be on it, and it costed Josh. He could have been 2-0 right there, tied for first, but now he's 1-1 in the middle of the pack. So shout out to Hunter with a much-needed victory there. And Josh, set your lineup next week, my man. I actually don't, because I think you're playing me, but, you know, whatever you want to do. On to the next one here. We have Marcos versus Schutz. Another super close matchup. You would have thought this was the closest matchup, but no, the other one was. This one was also electric. Came down to the last minute. I was actually watching this game last night because I had tuned in, and I have the screenshot. I took a screenshot. I was like, this moment has to be like remembered, has to be documented. So I'll put it up on the screen here. But there was a moment where these two were tied at 132.56, and there was only like 5 or 6 minutes left in that Vikings game. And literally, I think Kirk Cousins had thrown an interception. I was like, yo, Justin Jefferson isn't going to get another point. Like, this is going to be a tie. I don't know if ever in a regular season matchup I have seen a tie in fantasy football. Have you?
No, I've never seen. I've seen it close, but
like,
I mean that's about as close as it gets.
And I mean, even there was like to the point. Like, it wasn't just 132 and 132. It was 132.56. So that was electric. I think Justin Jefferson, obviously, he did get another catch, and that pushed Marcos over for the victory. But right down to the last second, could have went either way. So great matchup. Love to see it. And Justin Jefferson really didn't have a great week, but he has Stephon Diggs. So kind of we talked about last week with him stacking that wide receiver position with 2 top 5 guys. If one guy has a bad week, Marcos is safe because his other one's going to go for 44 points. All right, so next one we have Braden versus Blake. Now, I think going into last week, this was 1 versus 12, and it kind of showed. Blake's team came through again for him, and it was not on the back of Saquon Barkley, which it was week 1. Week 2, Saquon Barkley has a bad week, but Blake's team continues to do good. We knew Blake's team was going to be good from the time of the draft. His was one of the better teams, and it came through. Now, Jalen Waddle, just like we talked about Tyreek Hill, insane games. That fuels it, but overall, just a really good team win for Blake. And he overcame a 0-point guy from Paris Campbell, which was not hurt. He played in the game and just literally didn't get a target. And you would have thought with Michael Pittman being out, and I think another one was there 2 receivers. Oh yeah, it was the rookie Alec Pierce, and Michael Pittman Jr. were both hurt. You would have thought Paris Campbell would have had a great day. He doesn't, but it doesn't hurt Blake as he still comes out ahead.
And Jalen Hurts he was a good fantasy quarterback last year, but even this year, just through the first 2 games, I mean, his output has been pretty insane. And so as long as Najee Harris can kind of pick it up as the season goes on, and as long as Saquon can kind of keep up, this week he was down a little bit, but he's going to have a really hard team to beat if Waddle is continuing to be that go-to guy for Tua.
Definitely. And for my man Braden here, he's struggling. He's off to an 0-2 start. He's at the bottom of the standings. He needs Dalvin Cook to show up. I mean, he traded for him. He gave up some good assets. And Dalvin Cook and Joe Mixon not even combining to score 20. We talked about Marco stacking his 2 wide receiver positions in the draft. Braden here has 2 of the top 5, 2 of the top 10 running backs in Mixon and Cook. And when you spend that much, you need them to produce, right? Or at least one of them to produce. And for the other one to have a bad week, you can't have 2 guys having subpar weeks from your 2 most important players. I mean, that's just you can't win that way. It's impossible.
And on paper, Braden has one of the best cores out of the league.
Yeah.
Because Dalvin Cook is historically like a top running back in fantasy. Joe Mixon's supposed to be like a top 15 player. Deebo Samuel was one of the best players in fantasy last year. He won me a league last year almost single-handedly. And then you add in Rodgers in there on the top. Rodgers has been the MVP the last 2 years. So you look at that core and you think on paper, this team is stacked, but it just like anything, it just comes down to how they execute and if they're getting the ball. And he's got 6 carries here. That's really low for Dalvin Cook.
Really low.
And then Mixon's got 19 carries, but he only had 57 rushing yards. So you would expect with 20 carries, he should be closer to 90 to 100 yards or at least 80.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's pretty rough. So, he's got a core that could bounce back, but they're not really helping him out a whole lot.
Not at all. And the Bengals have more problems than just Joe Mixon right now. So both Braden and the Bengals need them to figure that one out. So on to our next matchup. My man, Lucas Larson right here, Book of Mormoms, number 1 seed, number 1 team name. And you got an easy win over my man Sam. Now, I will admit, I predicted Sam to actually win this matchup. I like Sam's team. I think Sam has a great team, and I thought he had a bad week 1. I thought they would bounce back and win. Now, I will say, even though he lost, and it was a huge margin, you blew him out, that goes more credit to you than him, because at 125, he actually would have beat half of the league if he had played a different matchup. But because it was you, he got blown out. So, kind of tough for him on that end, but go ahead, my man. How did you feel about your matchup, your week?
Well, initially when I was looking at this matchup, I actually felt pretty good about it. When I looked at his starting tight end position, I'm not good with pronunciation, so I'm not even going to try. But this guy from Denver, I really wasn't hopeful that he was going to have a big game. And then I also looked at Dortch. Dortch ended up having a pretty solid game, but he's still kind of early into his career too. And then DJ Chark. He's an up and down player. So looking at it, I wasn't necessarily too worried about it from the bottom half of his lineup, but the top half is what scared me. Because whenever you have Austin Eckler and Josh Allen in your lineup, you can automatically expect those guys to get a lot of touches and have a big game. So I was kind of hopeful that with Lamar and Chubb and Cup that I was able to make up for some of that. But the biggest thing that helped me out was those players that I had high expectations for before the season started. Cooper didn't really give me much of anything last week, and really Andrews didn't either, and Devontae Smith had no points. So I was hopeful that those guys that are historically, solid fantasy players or even really good fantasy players, I was hopeful that they would bounce back. And they really did in a big way. The Browns really started looking for Cooper. He had a wide open touchdown. They didn't even cover him. Andrews is usually a favorite target for Lamar. Lamar had a huge game. So it was just kind of going back to those basic things where those guys that you expect to play well in fantasy, they bounced back and had really good weeks. And it's just so coincided that I had 4 guys with really, really good games. So it doesn't matter how good of a lineup. Unless you just are absolutely perfect, it's really hard to beat someone with that many players that have that good of a game.
Definitely. And if I'm Sam, I'm not even mad. I'm not even worried. Like, yeah, you're 0-2. Yeah, you're toward the bottom. But, like, dude, you put up 125. And like I said, that was better than half the league. And 2 of your guys got 0 points. Like, if that happens, you're talking if they can just get 10 points, you beat 3/4 of the league. You may be the second highest points total besides just you. So Albert O, DJ Chark really hurt him. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how many points they probably scored. They weren't going to win the matchup. I'm not worried if I'm Sam. Bounce back, get the win in week 3.
And it also hurts him too, because if you look at his bench, he kind of had nowhere to turn. I mean, you risk dropping someone that you have hopes for later on in the season, but you don't want to drop Kamara. You don't want to drop Darnell Mooney. There's still
he lost and he had Kamara. Yeah, Kamara's on it, so he's got nothing to worry about.
And I mean, Hunter Henry didn't have any points. He only had 1 target. Moore, he didn't have any points. So, at the end of it, there was really not much else that he could do. And Chark did have a touchdown last week. He caught a touchdown over Darius Slay, who just had a huge game. So, I mean, you really can't blame him. So he was just kind of like fighting an uphill battle this week.
Yeah. So let it go. Brush it off your shoulders. Keep it moving. Final matchup of the week, we had Josh Locke versus PD the Great Phillip. This one goes to Phillip. And not super close. Not a blowout. Just kind of in the middle. Josh guys really just didn't show up. And there's really not much else to say. I don't think he had anyone that scored 20 points. I was looking earlier. Yeah, his best one was Michael Thomas, 18.5 points. That's good, but you got to have somebody. Let's see here. I know that Phillip had Amon-Ra St. Brown right there go for 40 points. Christian Kirk go for 25.8. So if you don't have anybody go off and it's just a solid week, then unfortunately you don't get a great score. So
yeah, and back to your point earlier about total team effort. If everybody's hitting their expectations and someone else has a couple players that don't, that makes the difference.
Yep.
Consistency.
So let's look at the standings. We've talked about it a little bit already, but we'll go ahead from the top to the bottom. Sitting at number 1, my man Lucas Larson with a total of 336 points scored, so 35 points ahead of our second place guy Blake. So you jumped up the standings 3 spots, I believe. You were number 4 going in, and I think that so Blake was 1. He's down to 2. You went from 4 up to 1. Me and Marcos both slid down. So I think it was the same top 4 in you, me, Blake, and Marcos, but basically me, Blake, Marco slid down one, and you leapfrogged all three of us. So good job on that part. So that's your top 4 right there. Lucas, Blake, Marcos, myself, all the undefeateds. Then this was cool too. 4 undefeated, 4 1-1, 4 0-2. So completely split right there. 4-4-4. And so 1-1 starting at number 5. Josh Turley, Phillip, Hunter, and Josh Locke coming in at number 8. And then of the totally defeateds, we have Schutz, Jacob, Sam, and Braden. So looking at the standings there, that wraps up week 2. Tune in Thursday for our week 3 predictions. We'll go through the matchup, see who we think's going to win, who we think's going to lose, and we'll give you those. So thank you for watching once again. Subscribe to my man's YouTube channel, Triple L Sports, right?
Yep.
And we'll see you Thursday. Thank y'all.